And we're live.
And thank you to In the Dugout. I am your host, Mike Stenhouse. Now, right there, just in that little opening, you heard from two famous Americans. Can you name them both? So the quiz. Should I tell you or should I wait for you to put them in the... No, I'll tell you. So first one, of course, was Larry the Liberty Guy. I mean, his fame is increasing every day as this show grows in international success. I mean, I think we're in the millions now with all the platforms we're on. Just kidding. But anyway, that was Larry the Liberty Guy. But the other famous American there, the organ player, that was the famous, say it with me now, John Kiley, who blessed the Fenway faithful for many decades, playing the organ at Fenway Park. And that was his terrific rendition of Take Me Out to the Ball Game that he would play. Of course, there was nothing like the seventh inning stretch when the whole crowd would sing. Maybe the only thing like it is the eighth inning Sweet Caroline thing they did. Fans seem to like that a lot, but as a little kid, there was nothing like Take Me Out to the Ball Game as we headed into the bottom of the seventh inning, led by the famous and irrepressible John Kiley. Okay. All right, In the Dugout. So some commentary to start the show after some quick batting practice. Woke equals weak, does it? Question mark. We'll talk about that. You know, this phrase originally meant something else. Believe it or not, it's been around for a long time. And we'll talk about that. We're going to get an update on the Barrington Black Lives Matter flagpole controversy from Paul Dukinos of a local veterans association there. Just the insults and the disrespect to veterans just keeps on in Barrington. And then, as is our tradition at the bottom of the hour, we'll have Dr. Andrew Bostom to talk all things COVID. Now, today, Dr. Bostom's going to introduce a new theory, something we've pretty much been talking around for the last 9 months or so, but the political health press triumvirate. I call it, I'm going to rename it for him, the political healthcare system press iron triangle. But anyway, that's what we'll talk about with Dr. Bostom. Okay, time for a little batting practice, just some quick hits, and time for me to put on my baseball cap. Since it's a beautiful spring day, and since I think I saw that the Red Sox won their exhibition game today, we'll go with the trusty Red Sox cap today in the dugout. Okay, yesterday you may recall that we put out, well, first just remember on Monday we put out a call for the governor to withdraw Rhode Island from the Transportation and Climate Initiative that Governor Raimondo signed us up for. Legislative action is needed, but we called for Governor McKee to withdraw Rhode Island. But now you can say no right here. We've already had thousands of emails sent out just since we launched this yesterday. So if you go to rifreedom.org, you can just put TCI, rifreedom.org/TCI. There's all kinds of stuff on this page. Here's that famous video of the Massachusetts official telling you that you're a bad guy for driving your car and that seniors on fixed incomes are bad guys and that we need to turn the screws on them in order to get them to stop driving and break their will. But there's all kinds of research, links to reports from ourselves. PragerU's got a cool video on carbon, the Green New Deal. There's something there. So go to that page, rifreedom.org/TCI, then click on right at the top here, say no to the TCI gas tax, and you can join with the thousands of others who are saying, no, I don't want to pay an extra $1,200 a year in gasoline costs and food and other goods costs because of the increased delivery fees for those products that are delivered or transported via vehicle. So again, go to rifreedom.org/TCI and you can read up all about the issue and you can join in saying no to the TCI gas tax. Okay, Joe, two executive happenings later today. Right about now, Governor McKee is supposed to be putting out his budget. Apparently, it's already been sent to lawmakers. I haven't been checking social media in the last few minutes, but apparently soon it will be public. And we will talk about that, obviously, next week. So that's our state executive, Dan McKee. Our national executive, Joe Biden, is giving his first, and I can't wait for this. I mean, I'm so excited to see that exciting personality, Joe Biden, speak tonight. I can't even tell you. I mean, can't even tell you. Not. I won't be watching. Joe Biden's giving his first national address tonight. Listen, we all know it. There's nothing Joe Biden can say that would be of interest to me. For the first reason, there's no independent, deep thought that Joe Biden has left. So he has nothing to say that could be of interest really to anybody. And two, we know that somebody else is writing that speech tonight. And we know that they are among the most far left progressives in our country. And I have no interest in listening to any of that. So I won't be tuning in tonight. I will watch the news accounts of it, maybe on the conservative. I'll even flip on the liberal media shows and see how they react to it. But to sit through, I don't know how long it'll be, of Joe Biden, the most exciting man in the world, the man who got 85 million votes. I just wouldn't be able to stand it. I mean, the excitement level would just be way too high. Speaking of votes, we said yesterday or the day before, I don't know, but this is the legislative session in Rhode Island. Of course, we know what's going on nationally, and the left comes at you from every conceivable angle. Taxes, degrading, raising taxes, raising fees, degrading educational choices, infringing on Second Amendment rights, infringing on First Amendment rights, increasing regulations on business. I mean, the bills that are submitted are incredible if you go through them all. And now there's going to be a bill that is, I don't even know how to describe it. They want to codify into law all of the horrible policies that led to such distrust of our election system last fall. All the things that they unconstitutionally did, all the things that broke the law that they did, and nobody held them accountable. They don't even want to risk being held accountable into the future. So there's a new group called Let Rhode Island, Let RI Vote. Just like the federal bill that we went over last week with Hans von Spakovsky, or was that earlier this week? I don't know. That talked about just the unbelievable provisions that will make it so easy to cheat for anybody who has a mind to do so. Now we see that Rhode Island politicians are looking to do the same thing. I mean, we talked to Hans last week about this from Heritage Foundation. Same day registration. You can walk up, register to vote, not have to show an ID, and vote. Okay, you might say, well, what's wrong with that? Well, because you could walk right down the street to another precinct, register to vote, and vote there. And you could do it repeat. I mean, there's so many holes. It's so easy to cheat in all of these provisions. And it's just nonstop. It really is. They overwhelm you. The lack of fortitude of and I know that not everybody in the General Assembly, even many are not socialists. They're not progressives. They're not indecent people. But yet they go along with socialist and progressive and immoral legislation just so they're not criticized by the woke left. Speaking of woke, let's talk about that for a little bit. Somebody said something, I don't even know where I was watching, and I came up with someone was talking about how weak woke people are. So, and I agree. You know, when you have low self-worth, when you have high insecurities, you can get offended by almost anything personally, and it seems increasingly attractive for you to join some tribe, right, or some group, just to feel like you belong, and then you blindly support the dictates of that group. Now, I'm not a psychologist, but this is not psychology. This is common sense. And I wonder, well, so in the left's utopian world of woke, they think we can exist in a world where nobody's offended by anything. Now, if being offended causes you to have your life ruined, then you're weak. I'm sorry, you're weak. And most of this wokeness seems to me to come from the millennial crowd. And don't forget, and they were the ones for decades we've been warning about, let's give free trophies to everybody, let's give trophies to everybody, first place, fifth place, last place, or else they're going to go on a petulant tirade for being treated differently, even though they didn't earn something. We're now sowing those fruits, however the phrase goes. I'm so terrible at those phrases. We're sowing the oats we seeded. Is it something like that? I don't know, something like that. So woke generally means, now, did you also know woke that phrase started 70, 80 years ago for a similar but much more important reason. And now it's been devolved. It's been bastardized, if you may. I'll get to that in a second. But woke generally means that you've been awakened to the injustices that are happening around the world and to our fellow man and woman, be it sexism, racism, any other kind of discrimination, and that anything that can be perceived to fit into one of these injustices somehow becomes shattering to people. just a mere an image or a phrase. We used to say sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me. Well, words now hurt people. I don't know why. I'm not a psychologist, so I can't go that deep, but they do. Is it pretend? Is it real? Is it? I'm just saying it's because you're weak. In the 1940s, a phrase woke that was originally designed to protect and raise awareness about minority rights, Black American rights, a real issue at that time in our country's history, a real issue. The civil rights movement of the 60s hadn't started yet. But how a phrase originally meant to protect rights now has come to mean an erosion of rights. So we have all these snowflakes out there, people who are easily offended by anything, like we said, any mention of a phrase or any image. I mean, here's how far it goes. Even you might have heard this on the news, but even Grease, the great, wonderful musical movie, has now been deemed to be by snowflakes to be doesn't fit the woke agenda. So these snowflakes can get triggered, right? These are all the buzz terms by pretty much anything that happens, and they believe pretty much anything that their tribal leaders tell them. And I've said it before on this show. Woke means being hypnotized to me. You are under hypnosis. Whatever my tribal leaders say is bad, I'm gonna suffer great anxiety for. And whatever my tribal leaders say I should listen to, I will listen to, and nothing else. So this word woke, originally designed by, I think by, if I recall reading my what I just read earlier today, by many African American entertainers who would weave into their songs or performances certain phrases to call out the real civil rights abuses they were suffering, their people were suffering at the time. But today, woke has come to now raise awareness about issues that don't exist. This is what I said yesterday. They make up an issue. They make up a victim class. They make up discrimination. Did you hear the new one? I didn't even know this. I heard some discussion on it yesterday. Now that what's a AAIP, Asian American Island something. I mean, so now now all of a sudden, have you heard this? That there's now systematic racism against Asian Americans in America. That's false. It's a made up. They're trying to create another victim class. They're trying to create another woke moment, and they're trying to divide people. And they're trying to get now Asians, just like they did with African Americans over this past summer, to I don't know, to just hate white people and to hate the system and hate America. So now they're trying to do it with Asian Americans. Yes, I'm looking here at my notes. A blues singer in the 1940s, Lead Belly, L-E-A-D, sang in his song Scottsboro Boys. I advise everybody to be a little careful when they go along through there. Stay woke, keep their eyes open. What this woke movement has become is the woke brigade. This woke brigade, if you may, is the thought police that George Orwell warned us about. Right? Can there be any denying that? It has now evolved into policing your thoughts. Not just your actions, not just the words you write, but even your thoughts. And the worldview of the woke week, basically is this. First, that the oppressive class, whites and others, are so used to it, it's so normal that we don't even realize that we're oppressing others. And that the oppressed class, all the victim classes they create, likewise are so used to being victimized, so used to being oppressed, that not even they realized that they've been discriminated against or are being actively discriminated against. So becoming woke opens your eyes to these fake realities they want to put forth. And this is why, in an article I read today, this is why you can't have a debate. I mean, I know I've seen curriculum passed to me. You cannot get into it. You know, this is a curriculum, consulting pieces handed out at corporations or educational institutions. If you are a white person, do not even try to get into a debate about race with a black person, because you're not even in the same universe. You can't even begin to understand each other. This is what they believe. This is, you know what I mean? They believe that everything exists in this oppress versus oppressor. And if you're part of the oppressor, you can't possibly understand what it's like to be oppressed. And this is why you can't have debate with the left, because they don't even believe that we can understand, that only they can understand, and that we've come to normalize all this. So we could spend a lot more time on this, but I'm not. I'm gonna play just a couple more images and then a short video, and then we'll get to our guest on Barrington. But here, so woke is resulting, in even Abraham Lincoln, the guy who freed slaves, his statue is being torn down, and even Dr. Seuss, who was a hero of the left, Barack Obama and Michelle Obama read it to kids, but no, that's too bad. And then this was a good infographic I saw. So just imagine our society where Cardi B and that vulgar look and song she puts out can win Song of the Year, but yet Cat in the Hat is inappropriate. Does any of this make sense to you? Does any of this make any sense to you? All right, let me share this. Just spend a couple minutes laughing. There was a video I found of a guy who teaching us how to speak woke. And if you'll bear with me for a minute, I will bring it up.
When they see words getting changed. But language is always evolving. And bless this food to our use, a woman. Now there are gendered words that naturally
not amen, a woman.
should change, like policeman should just be police officer. But there's a difference between gendered words and non-gendered words. And I'm trying to remove that difference so that we can be one step closer to getting offended by everything.
So this guy's trying to teach us how to be offended by everything.
Example, master bedroom. Now this one's interesting because it was first created by Sears as part of a marketing campaign in the 1920s and has zero ties to slavery or racism. But by making it about race, we offer more people the opportunity to get offended. A big part of this is trying.
Yeah, he's right. Becoming offended, being a victim is now the cool thing in society.
Trying to avoid masculinity as much as humanly possible. I mean, as much as humanly possible. Like fungi, which has guy right there in the word. So we're walking around saying guy, fungi, and nobody realizes that we're just walking around talking about mushrooms while at the same time unknowingly exfoliating this toxic masculinity. So from now on, I propose that we call fungi fundrogeny. They're not homeless, temporarily displaced, or housing challenged. Boom, crisis solved. In order for language to evolve to be as inclusive as possible, it needs to kind of not make sense for a while. Dickie's jeans are now vaginese jeans, which is why we're not calling them Easter eggs anymore. We're calling them spring spheres, because we want to be inclusive to people who don't celebrate Easter, and we also want to be inclusive to people who don't believe in eggs. And all of Charles Dickens' books should be reprinted as written by Charles Uterus.
You get the... It goes on. The guy's name is, what's his name here? I can't even see his name here. If you want to look it up on YouTube, it's kind of funny. Steve Lindsay was his name. I don't even know here. Anyway, okay, so that's my little commentary on the woke week. Let's, and that woke week, those woke week people have popped up in Barrington, where in order to go along with the crowd, Black Lives Banner flag was flown on a Veterans Memorial flagpole next to Town Hall. Paul Duquinos, welcome back to In the Dugout.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me.
What cap you got on today?
Oh, I'm doing a little homage to my daughter. It's MIT dad.
MIT dad. She's an MIT gal, right?
Yeah, it skips a generation. My father went there, but I didn't. But my daughter is. So.
All right. So
the gene pool.
All right. So just by quick background, we had this BLM flag that we're looking at now flown on the flagpole the Veterans Memorial that you have some oversight over, that's on town property. You tried to remove it. You had town hall meetings. They refused to move it. And we talked about that with you and others. But what has happened since then, Paul?
All right. Well, what happened was that they did pass a flag ordinance, which allows them to have the ability under government speech to put whatever banners they wish. So contrary to what government speech, like what Cuba, Venezuela, the communist Chinese have, the government speaks for the people. So because of that, we see that,
but only for some of the people, right?
Right, select few, those part of the party elite. So despite them bringing the flag down on the 3rd of March, because they kept it through Black History Month, the problem is that this could be a recurring event. They still have the ability to fly banners at will. Since then, we had started a submission.
So wait a minute. First of all, did they take it down on March 3rd?
Yeah, they did take it down on the March 3rd after 6 months of being flown.
All right, but you're still concerned about what could happen on your flagpole in the future.
Right,
okay.
Especially since we have started a campaign to fly other flags under government speech. We have 9 submissions to date. Only 1 made it through. So of course, my flag, which right here is, had to modify it, respect the flag, keep politics off the pole. We had to modify it because the original design had stylistically a US flag in the design. So they used that as the criteria. So I resubmitted with the new design, and then they canked that design as well. The Gadsden flag was denied. An Italian Sicilian heritage flag was denied. The thin blue line was denied. Choose Life has been denied. Your very own Freedom and Prosperity flag was denied.
Yes, I know somebody tried to put that in. Did they? Somebody actually did try?
Yes, it made it all the way. They could not find sponsorship. So the town council, one of the members has to sponsor it, or the town manager. So the 6 part of the gang of 6, none of them managed to recommend it.
Hold on 1 second. I want to show that flag. Yeah, somebody asked me, so we just clipped that part out of our corporate logo. Hey, it's not promoting a business. Doesn't everybody want freedom and prosperity? So and I said, if you can get it passed, we'll make the flag for you. But it didn't happen, did it? Okay.
Yeah, well, it's a value statement.
Yeah, it is.
But it's not their values.
Like Black Lives Matter is a value statement, right?
Right. Even Stop Anti-Semitism was denied. And veterans' lives matter in the sense of the suicide issue that we have, where 22 veterans take their life every day. That was denied as well. The only thing that managed to get through after a 45-minute to an hour debate was an autism awareness flag will be flown for the month of April. But in light of this,
you want no causes on the flag, right?
Yeah. In light of this, that this is just it's opening the door, and it happens to be that this flagpole sits for our Veterans Memorial, and that was part of an agreement. I don't remember, about 10 years ago when we built the memorial, they relocated the town's flagpole to co-locate it over our memorial. Just at that time, it was a nice gesture to bring in an American flag. That way we didn't have to.
All right. So whose memorial is it?
Well, at the time, the VFW Post, the Veterans Foreign War Post, collected funds and received legislative grants to have a wall with bronze plaques in place to be created at the grounds of the town hall. Through the fundraising efforts of a private organization.
So private funds on public lands.
Correct. Yeah, we know where that goes, right? And so that was funded. It was installed. They moved. The town agreed to move the flagpole over rather than us having to erect our own flag. And everything was wonderful for many years. Yeah, that was the motif that was rejected. See, that has the U.S. flag.
No, can't have that.
No, we can't have the U.S. flag in there. So we had to go with a more neutral design. So knowing that this fiasco was going to continue, and that it detracts from the decorum, from the dignity and the honor that we should be presenting towards our veterans. We had said, we first, okay, can you move the flagpole back? The town manager said, I'm the CEO of the town, and I will deny your
back to where again? Back to where?
back to the front lawn, away from our memorial. So
Okay.
they moved it, yeah. So, but they denied that. So they weren't willing to do that. They were willing to change the ordinance to just restrict it to the state, town, and POW flag. So our final resolution was last week, we requested that we will move our memorial from that site.
All right, so let me stop. So hold on. So this is a memorial that was funded by private donations specifically for Veterans Memorial many years ago. The town said you can put that on our property. And now you're petitioning the town to say we want to take our memorial off this property, remove it from this controversy with the flag so we can manage it the way we want to manage. Is that what you asked?
That sort of, we still said we'd like your cooperation because there is another location by the high school, by Victory Gate, where there are other memorials. And we said, well, we'd like to move it from there because it's obviously an issue.
To a different piece of public land.
Yeah, it would still be public land, but it would be a dedicated site. Of course, we would want them now to leave us alone. And there's another flagpole there. It was donated by the late Senator Dave Bates.
David, yeah.
So we were going to co-locate it. That would be a great place for us to co-locate all the monuments in one location. It'd be like our own Veterans Park, and away from all the chaos of the town hall and all the politics, virtue signaling, and the partisan banner.
And the town said,
nope, won't do it. Says it's our property now. The town manager, I guess, must have got a legal opinion, and they think that the monument is theirs now.
even though your group raised the funds or
Exactly.
groups associated with you there, but you put it on their so is there going to be a legal fight over this, or is the story over?
We are investigating legal avenues. We're going to move forward and attempt to get a summary judgment, hopefully from a friendly court that will give our ownership of it. We're willing to move it at our own cost. We would do our own fundraising. We would restore the land to how it was prior to our monument being there. We just want to be left alone.
How big is the memorial from a acreage or?
It's
not acreage, just square feet.
It's sort of a brick stone piece of works that's probably no more than maybe it's about 12 feet long, extended, maybe a few feet deep. It's just a stone wall in which we were able to.
If some generous private property owner, because there are some beautiful homes on the main drag in Barrington, said, "Hey, you can put this right on my front lawn on private property," would you consider that?
Oh, of course, yeah, that would be a nice gesture. It may be.
Let's put the call out to Barrington people. Come on, help these veterans out. They should not have to put up with this kind of political abuse.
Maybe on one.
Isn't it disrespect to veterans?
Yeah, it's just another slap in the face. I'm representing a group of primarily Vietnam veterans who weren't treated too kindly when they returned back from the Vietnam War, and this, to them, this is like they're getting spit in the face all over again. And how quickly. It's funny. Your intro was great when you talked about wokeness, and woke is equal to weak. Also, just recently, I heard Senator Tim Scott use the phrase, "We have to beware of woke supremacy." That's what we're really worried, and not white supremacy, but woke supremacy.
Well, that's what it's come to, for sure.
And I think
that's what he said. Something where you were defending rights, now you're infringing on rights. So it's completely reversed itself. It has, and it's become its own dominant thing. All right, Paul, we got to run. I got to get to my next guest. When you have an update, you're always welcome back here on this.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for being.
Paul Duquesne, I respect him, not giving up the fight in Barrington. Listen, this is their veterans group's monument, and the city hall is not only, insulting the veterans with these flags and these values that veterans don't believe in necessarily, but now they won't even let them manage or move their own memorial that they paid for. Folks, what's happening very quickly before we get to Dr. Boston? What's happening here, and I had a good discussion with a nationally known figure. Cities and towns are now becoming, government's supposed to work for all of us, right? Everybody's supposed to be nonpartisan government. I mean, we can have politics and elections, but government itself is supposed to work for all the people, not just the insider class. But cities and towns are now becoming political entities. They're dominated. We know in the big cities, dominated by the liberal left. now the socialist left. Many of our towns as well, dominated by progressives. We saw the whole state of Nevada. The moderate Democrats left en masse after the progressives took over. These local cities and towns are becoming nothing more than political entities, political arms of the left. And this is opposed to rural America. And when you look at any national map on national elections, you'll see that. The large rural areas are red and the cities and towns are blue. But the politics, they're playing such unfair partisan politics, and I'd have the same criticism of Republicans. So we'll keep an eye out on that, but keep that in mind that cities and towns are now becoming nothing more than just another petty, biased, partisan political entity. All right, it's time to bring in Dr. Andrew Bostom. Andy, welcome back to In the Dugout.
Hi, Mike.
Hey, Andy, how you doing today?
Good.
Well, you sent me all kinds of stuff this week. I don't even know if we'll get to it all, but we can try if you want.
Yeah, I think I'm looking forward, Mike, to I've set a date since no one else will. And it's actually a late date for me because I think it should be now. But I think we have enough information that Easter Sunday should be our full opening unmasking day here in Rhode Island.
Yeah, Easter had well, President Trump was wrong about that last year. So, remember, I mean, you look back on it, that was kind of silly, maybe, to think that within a couple of weeks we'd be ready by Easter last year to undo everything.
Be that as it may, it's hardly silly now.
It's hardly silly now. All right, let me get through some really quick things before we get into the main thing you want to talk. So let's fly through these pretty quickly, but I want to show a lot of the things that you sent to me. So First, the dreaded UK variant. Look at how those infections are rising.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just in the UK, Mike. I just looked at a graphic from Denmark, and it's probably outdated. It's probably a higher percentage now. Their curve is the same sort of epi curve, dropping precipitously, and the UK variant is now 76% of their samples.
So just look at how it's
same thing. By the way, same thing for Switzerland. I mean, it's just
it's so deadly. Look how many more people it's killing.
Well, Mike, I just want to go through this really quickly. There was a painfully, actually a reprehensible paper that appeared in the British Medical Journal, completely misrepresenting the mortality data. Publishing something that should never have been published and suggesting that there was about a 65% increase in mortality. And I went through the paper very carefully, and I've been at it with others on Twitter. They didn't even adjust for comorbidities. They did, and it turns out something you'd be familiar with now from from our weekly sessions. The variant group, for whatever reason, which was not adjusted for, had much lower cycle thresholds, and so they just throw this out there, and they don't mention the fact that there have been other studies in England itself, which showed actually a protective effect of the variant using the same kinds of analyses, and one that showed absolutely zero effect. But the bottom line was, even in this study, which is claiming a 65% increase, and that's a relative increase, the absolute difference between the two groups was 0.15%.
Yep.
I mean, so, and of course, I'm waiting for them to glom onto this at the update tomorrow. The paper just came out a few days ago, in Rhode Island as yet more panic pornography to keep us locked down, to keep us from, it's really, I'm at my limit, Mike. I've never seen anything like this. I have a 40-year career now in public health and in clinical medicine and healthcare, between my career as a physical therapist and a physician, and starting in 1980. We were taught back then, it was already the prevailing paradigm, that you go by evidence-based medicine. You don't go by anecdote. You don't go by terribly confounded observations.
Well, everything they've done is evidence-based, Andy. Come on, don't you know that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I used to laugh too, but it's just, it's out of control. And it has real consequences when you're dealing with an epidemic, pandemic, and you're talking about things that were considered verboten in very recent times, like lockdowns and mandates, mask mandates, and things like that. And yet they keep doubling down on them, Mike. And this is what's so frustrating. And I really believe now, because I'm comfortable talking to you about political things too, I cannot get away from the fact that this is really, you see the concordance of forces, political, public health.
All right, we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that.
And the press.
All right, we're going to get to that. I want to get through these other graphs first. All right. So here, maybe this will cool your jets. I hope you'll see this as good news. I know you sent me some other charts.
Yeah, this is it. I sent you this too. Oh, okay. Well, anyway.
It's a slightly different one than you sent me, but this is, so Rhode Island is now at the head of the pack when it comes to vaccinating people 65 and older. That's good, isn't it?
And 75 plus, Mike.
Okay,
75
great.
plus too. I just saw an update of 75 plus. And what that tells us, Mike, both of those numbers are over 65%, even 70% now. What that tells us is that we are doing what's physically possible to do to protect the most vulnerable. On top of that, Mike, if you look at the DOH website, there are at least, they chronicle at least 130 infections by tests. And let's say just, some of them are duplicates, but we know that roughly 2,600 persons in the state have died. So if you take that group that passed away out of that number, we probably still have at least 125,000 persons in the test that have recovered from COVID and contributing to herd immunity. But the CDC estimates that for each person that you identify as being infected, there are 5 that you don't identify. We could have over 600,000 people in this state that have been infected at some level. Now we're vaccinating the most vulnerable. That's why I argue that Easter Sunday should be our opening.
Yeah, I think that's very reasonable. In fact, I saw last week, I don't think we got to talk about it, I had it on my list, but Rhode Island was listed as one of 7 states
Yes,
at over 60% who was approaching herd immunity.
Right.
So,
right.
We should be when you get to herd immunity, it's very hard for the virus to spread in any meaningful way, right?
It's certainly
okay
to spread in a way that's gonna hospitalize and kill people.
Right. Okay. All right, let's go on to our regular chart. So positivity rates looking stabilized, but at a pretty low level.
Yeah, within the margin of false positive error, Mike. I would put it that way. Honestly, we just don't know what it means. And again, we didn't succeed. We had sort of a minor victory where we got that data request on the cycle thresholds. But the idea of that was that it should be posted every day at the website. We're nowhere near that. But I guarantee you it would look very much like what we found.
Yep.
In other words, these tests are now in the range where it's probably at cycle thresholds, 30 plus, most predominantly.
Well, when we look at the next 2 charts, it pretty much proves your point that even though the positivity rates are staying the same, hospitalizations are going down, which means that that people are not as severely afflicted, right?
Absolutely. Hospitalization. We've had
the same with deaths. Yep.
We've had at least 2 days where there's been 0 deaths again. And thank goodness for that. And you actually, they show up as little notches. Yep. Mike, the 0 deaths show up as little notches on these charts. These are the hospitalizations.
Let me quickly, I forgot to share. So here's the positivity rate. I wasn't sharing the screen this whole time we're talking about. There's the hospital rates going down, and there's
and some of these notches in here, Mike. Some of these notches are zeros, are true zeros.
All right, so the picture continues to improve in Rhode Island. All right, let's stay on hospitalization. Well, so
yes,
why don't you bring in your why don't you bring in your political health press triumvirate that I'm calling the Iron Triangle theory into play as it relates to hospitalizations. Go ahead, Andy.
Well, I think we have, and it's sad to say this, but I'm convinced now we have one journalist left in the state of Rhode Island. One. His name is Ed Acorn. Okay, he's the only journalist that has done actual investigative journalism of COVID. It's a tragedy. It's a travesty. It's a tragedy. What Ed did, and it was the last thing, by the way, that he published in Providence Journal before his early retirement, shall we say. This is it. What Ed did is, can you hold on this graphic here, right there? Can you just hold that up? This is what the Department of Health, with Brown University, with the wonderful epi savants at Brown University and the savants in the Department of Health. This is what they predicted. You know, remember the whole basis of lockdowns and masking and all these other mitigation measures was to prevent the hospitals from becoming overwhelmed and overrun.
Right.
They actually
Flatten the curve while we build capacity. Right.
They actually put this out. This is what guided the policy, that we were going to have, in the conservative estimate, a peak of 22,000 people in the hospital for COVID at a given time on May 3rd, or 2,250, or 4,300. Ed, we peaked at 375 during the first wave. Now, for people to be 11-fold and 6-fold off with their quote unquote models, and these are the same people that are modeling now that are going to tell us when we can stop these mitigation measures. Governor McKee has to know this. This is very important for him to know. Yeah, we peaked at 375 in the first wave on April 28th. Even with the second wave, where as we've discussed, Mike, the designation of what was a hospitalization was absurd.
But still nowhere near approaching even the conservative, the 2250. Nowhere near.
That's right. And in the second wave, we have to remember the Department of Health admitted that people were admitted with medical conditions that had nothing to do with COVID and quote unquote tested positive, or had been previously admitted with COVID and now came back for some medical issue that had nothing to do with COVID. So COVID was part of their comorbidity sheet. And those were all counted as COVID admissions. But even with that overcounting, we never came close to these projections by the great savants in the Department of Health and over at the Epi department at Brown. And Ed is the only person who investigated that. He wasn't brought, the media didn't come to him and talk to him about that. He did the same thing with cycle thresholds. You know, when you and I and Representative Morgan were all putting in our requests and were initially rebuffed, and we discussed this and what was going on, I never got a phone call. Worse still, Mike, when the data was released, and even when I published the data in a preprint, in an academic preprint on a medical server that's widely used, I was never called for an interview to discuss the ramifications of these data by the lapdog press. All they do is regurgitate.
That goes back to your triumvirate theory, right?
Yes, all they do is regurgitate the same talking points that you hear at these briefings and updates. It's an absolute disgrace, and unfortunately, Ed's retired, so he's working on his books now. So he doesn't want any part of this. He had a belly full, but this is the problem, Mike. When you have sycophants covering the public health department and covering the governor's office, you get nowhere. And the public gets no information for them to weigh and judge themselves.
Well, we also know that the national sycophants, in addition to the local sycophants, told us that wearing masks would make a big difference. Well,
right. Look
at that.
Exactly. And that's on top of denying. And now I'm not talking about the press, although the press, you know, I mean, they shouldn't be so unsophisticated and lazy. That's after denying the fact that since 2008, including COVID itself, we've had 12 randomized controlled trials that looked at masking versus non-masking in controlled settings, all kinds of settings outside, medical centers. Hajj pilgrims, university students, household contacts. Every single study has been negative. Now, going back again to my initial training, going back to 1979, 1980. So for 40 years, the paradigm is that if there is a question about an intervention, from something as complicated as a vaccine to something as simple as a mask, you adjudicate it ultimately with randomized controlled trials. I have never heard of anything that went through 12 years and 12 negative trials and was still forced down people's throats. This is just not appropriate. Never heard of it.
How did Ronald Reagan say it? When the government planners' plans fail, the government planners plan more.
Yeah. Well, I heard a very poignant testimony by a father in Ohio protesting the renewal, I guess, of Governor DeWine's own draconian mandates. And what he said is it's enough. We are being treated, the Ohioans are being treated by the Ohio Department of Health as if we are hospitalized patients who have given up our right to informed consent. And I thought that was a perfect way to describe it, because the procedures being imposed upon us en masse, are not with our consent. When you're a patient in a hospital, if a physician is adamant that a particular diagnostic procedure or biopsy procedure is important to his care, and the patient is afraid and wants an alternative and just doesn't want it, you don't have the police come in, tie the person down, and do the biopsy. I mean, it just doesn't work that way, Mike.
Yeah, informed consent. Yeah. All right. All right. I want to cover a couple more issues with you. One that was brought up on our discussion thread by Claire. I don't know if she wanted me to ask you about it, but I will. So I think it's interesting. What about travel, especially international travel? I mean, so talk to me. Are other countries seeing the same declines we're seeing? Do you think it's safe to open up international travel? What is your view on that?
Yeah, I think that these declines are taking place all over the world. You do have to be aware of hotspots. I think South America is still maybe a little bit behind us. Brazil in particular, they looked like they were about. I know I looked at their epi curve the last time. It looked like they were maybe 6 weeks or so behind us. So they'll come down. They'll come down, but you can look at the epi curves, Mike. You can see the places that are right about peaking now, as opposed to where we're way on the descent curve. And I think that's it's kind of straightforward. That's where you make these judgments.
Have you seen any indication that international travel is either being loosened because of the worldwide decline or being tightened because of these false fears over these variants?
If anything, I still think the variants are driving what's going on. I honestly haven't focused on that particular issue, but when I hear about what the European countries are doing to each other, it's all sort of a fear narrative driven by, oh, we don't want this variant to get into our country. Meanwhile, they get in, and if they're on the downward part of the curve, they do okay. It is a little disconcerting though, considering that they're still behind in South America. Certainly, maybe I don't know how Central America is if they're behind, but South America is a little behind. We have the destruction of our border and the inability to test the traditional way for immigrants. That this goes back to Ellis Island. I mean, you had to be tested for possible infections.
All right, I got another question. I think she meant Andy from Louise. He asked how to Larry, but I think she meant Andy. So you are of Jewish background. You talk often about issues related to that. The question is, and I don't even know if this is true, how does Andy feel about mandatory health passes like in Israel?
I don't like what's going on in Israel whatsoever. So, and I have plenty of sympathy for Israel, and I consider myself a Zionist, but how they've handled COVID, I have no sympathy for what they've done.
Very heavy-handed?
Very, very, very heavy-handed. And, I'm not sure with their experiment on mass vaccination of pregnant women if that's particularly wise. They had a few scary cases. Some women got sick and were hospitalized, but I mean, overall, pregnant women, going back to the beginning, to the first wave, have done quite well with this. And again, but the bottom line is, in terms of vaccinating them, none of pregnant women were not included in the trials for the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines. It's risky. It's risky. No, so I'm not a fan of what's going on in Israel. They've had 3 lockdowns. It's kind of turned me off.
All right, I got one more sort of medical related question for you, and then we'll play a little politics, sort of, to follow up on what my opening commentary talked about. So here's an article I saw that I wanted to ask you about, so I saved it for you. Lasting immunity found after recovery from COVID. Initially, of course, the fear mongers wanted everybody to think, oh, once you recover, even though often it's a long time, this might only be 3 to 6 months. What are you seeing in this area?
It's absurd. So there's the epidemiologic evidence and there's the laboratory evidence. The epidemiologic evidence, since I'm an epidemiologist, I just happened to have looked at data from Israel. Speaking of Israel, the UK, Austria, and Qatar. So, a variety of countries, Middle Eastern countries, European countries. The total number of persons followed. These were persons who'd been infected in what was the first waves that afflicted these countries, the first COVID waves. And they were followed, I think, even out to 10 months in the case of Qatar, but for months at a time. And the reinfection rate, the raw reinfection rate, taking a weighted average of the different populations in the countries, Mike, was less than 0.25%. 0.25%, which means 99.75% did not get reinfected. I mean, that's better than a vaccine.
And how long does that last for?
And the follow-up in the case of Qatar was out to 10 months. But we're talking about months.
And is that typical for a virus that a natural immunity after you have it would be about a year or a little under, or do some last longer?
It can absolutely be that long. And then the laboratory evidence is more interesting, because the laboratory evidence suggests that both T-cell immunity and memory B-cell immunity. Remember, we have B cells that produce antibodies that are relatively short-lived, and they can rise and spike, and that's the kind of immunity that can, in fact, at least by assay, by testing, disappear within a few months, within 3 months or so, and that's what the panic pornographers latch onto. Well, there's also memory B cells besides the T cells, a whole separate form of immunity. Well, they're now finding that the memory B cells from the first wave are active against the variants. So are the T cells.
Okay.
This is all laboratory, Mike, but it's all we have at this point. Yep. It may or may not pan out, but we're kind of seeing that when you see that the epi curves for the second wave, even with heavy infiltration by the variants, are not changing. South Africa with a South Africa variant, they're not changing.
So with this 8 to 10 month period of immunity after recovery, lead you to believe that the vaccines themselves will have an 8 to 10 month or longer.
Probably the one study that looked at T cell immunity also in vaccinated persons, done by one of our most prestigious institutes of virology at La Jolla. They, again, in a laboratory model, in a laboratory setting, they found that the vaccine induced immunity by T cells was very robust too.
Okay.
So that's a reassuring finding anyway.
Let's venture into opinion politics. My main commentary today was about how woke equals weak, how the woke left, they're just too insecure emotionally to deal with anybody disagreeing with them or any perceived injustice on anybody else. It might have all derived from the trophies to everybody mentality that we grew this generation of kids up on. So here's my question. We know that it's the woke who are most afraid of the coronavirus, the ones who dutifully and happily wear a mask and lock themselves down and don't travel and whatever.
Okay, go ahead. I
You
think
know,
there's a variant on that.
is
Speaking of
this-
variants, but
Is this whole, well, other than people who have,
I mean, think of the Black Lives Matter riots over the summer. Those people didn't seem to be very afraid of
True.
COVID.
Well, yeah, okay, yeah. But so was this whole, what did you call it? What'd you call it? Porn, what? Porn?
Panic pornography.
Was this whole panic pornography about catering to the woke left?
Well, I think it's contributed. I think it's contributed, and the masking is now emblematic. It's a talisman of compliance and fear, and that's why I find it just so unconscionable that it's being imposed on children, because it's gonna raise another generation or a new generation of extraordinarily fearful young people. It's just awful and guilty. They feel they have to wear the mask because otherwise they'll kill grandma.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just absolutely awful psychology.
Yeah. All right, Andy.
And I have to tell you, Mike, my wife is a very accomplished academician, more accomplished than any of the people in the Department of Public Health. I say that openly, and it's true. Older, more experienced, more accomplished than any of them by far. She wears a Hamza. It's a Middle Eastern symbol with an eye. It's to ward off the evil eye. Jews wear them, Muslims wear them, Christians wear them from the Middle East. She has as much right to impose that on others as they have to impose masks on others. All right. That's just the way it is.
Thanks again for joining us. Another great discussion. Thanks for responding to our YouTube commenters. Is that the right word? Whatever. Those who put comments up. All right, Andy, we'll talk to you next week.
Always fun. Take care, Mike.
Yep. So, was it Paul Dukinos, our prior guest, who really said the word of the day, the phrase of the day? It's not white supremacy now, it's woke supremacy. These are weak people, afraid of their shadows, who want control over your lives, who are now ruling supreme. But that's okay. That's okay because they know best, because they're grounded in whatever sense of mythology they think they're grounded in. Woke supremacy. I'm going to be using that term a lot. I do remember reading about it the other day, and I'm glad it was brought up today. And I think it's really woke supremacy that was largely driving these panicked, as Dr. Bossum would call it, this panic pornography that forced us to destroy our economy, destroy jobs, destroy businesses, destroy families' budgets, destroy many people through suicides, destroyed them literally because of woke supremacy. For some reason, corporations, government officials, other entities feel they have to appease them. And I don't get it. I don't get it. The American people don't want any kind of supremacy over them, any kind. Individual supremacy, that's what America's about. No white supremacy, no black supremacy, no woke supremacy. Stop it. Let us live our lives. We are the supreme being. I have supreme control over my life, not government, not any other person, elitist, who wants to rule supreme over me. But yet we're allowing woke supremacy to rule us. I don't know why, but we are. Great topics. We got some really big issues coming up next week. I'm not even sure which ones will be next week or the week after, so I won't preview them here. But again, I thank you for tuning in, watching the show, whether it's live or after the fact. If it is March, what is today? March 10th or 11th. Hope you're enjoying this great weather before the next cold front comes in. We're not done with winter yet. May not be snow and frigid temperatures, but it's going to be nasty in the 30s again coming up. So enjoy the weather the next few days.